Hello there. What's going on, everyone? Today I'm going to be talking about Star Wars Armada and some things that I would love to see happen once Atomic Mass Games gets their hands on this game and officially assumes control, because I believe at least the next wave or two are still going to be coming out through Fantasy Flight until Atomic Mass Games fully kind of takes over this, as well as their other Star Wars miniatures games. And so today I'm going to be talking about some ideas, things I'd love to see happen beyond just new ships coming out. So I also want to remind you guys there's still time left to enter to win the giveaway for the $25 Amazon gift card. You just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. I usually announce winners towards the end of my videos, so stay tuned for that. So today we're going to be talking about some of these ideas, and I think the first thing that I want to go into is kind of addressing a question that people have had about the starters that they've put out for the Clone Wars factions, the Separatist and Republic starter. A lot of people have asked, are they going to be, and eventually releasing these ships as standalone ships, kind of like they did with the original starter, how they put out the Victory, the Nebulon, and the Corellian Corvette as their standalone expansion. I think what they should do instead is take this one step further and kind of give us the approach that they took with the Thrawn expansion, with the Chimera expansion. I would love to see this applied, and I'm talking about like repainted versions of ships. I think this is especially easier to do with some of the Clone Wars factions, since a lot of their ships are a little bit more colorful. But what I would love to see is this actually be applied to every ship across the board. Now, why do I say every ship? I'm talking every single ship. I would love to see every single ship in Star Wars Armada come out with a repainted version, because there's just so many more ship cards that they could do, and so many more titles and so many more variants of ships that you can really dig your teeth into without having to exhaust the relatively limited supply of canon ships as they are right now. There's only so many more ships that they can really do. And so there's a very limited design space on how much more this game can grow. And I think if you're doing repaints, they've certainly done this before in other games. We've seen Aces packs with Star Wars X-Wing, and of course we've seen the Chimera come out for Star Wars Armada. So there's really nothing stopping them from continuing in that trend of taking a ship that you already have the model for, you already have the basic design, balancing, and points cost for, coming out with a repainted version of it that gives you the opportunity to buy. By the way, these ships that were only available in the starter, now you can get those standalone as a repainted version, but also all the other ships that are out there, so you can get repainted versions of those. You can also put out new cardboard with an alternate ways to run this ship, so maybe like a Mark III or a Mark IV, different variants, different configurations of these ships. You can give them some different flavor, and you can do this strategically. I'm not saying do it all at once, but find the right time to begin doing it. And doing it to different ships, especially as certain ships are a little bit more in demand. You could even go so far as to put the original cardboard in these repaints as well. Although I think to do that might limit the resale of the original versions, so it depends on whether or not they want to keep making the original versions. Architans, I'm looking at you. If they wanted to do something like that. Now, at a certain point, that might be less than desirable, especially about ships that are going to appear in multiple factions. So I'm looking at like the Pelta, for example. We know that that's going to be showing up in the Rebels already, but it's also going to be showing up in the Republic. And so are they really going to want to make two more versions of the Pelta, a repainted Republic and a repainted Rebel? Probably not. That was probably last in line. But certain other ships are a lot more ripe for the repaint and relaunch type of approach. I'd love to see that. Another thing I'd love to see is a kind of a rebranded approach on how they look at what ships specifically to do. And I'm talking about Legends or EU stuff. Now, I get that the Dreadnought or the Katana fleet, while that is for the most part considered to be a Legends ship, it was made canon a few years ago with the slight appearance in the Thrawn comics, and also before that in the Rebels season 4 finale, or the series finale. We did get the Imperial support ship, which I believe was a Dreadnought class cruiser. However, it is in the new canon It would be nice to see this, and other ships from Legends and stuff. I mean, look, this is a game that has Legends stuff in it. It was begun before Disney bought Lucasfilm, so this was, this was started. That's how we have an assault frigate, a Mark II-A, and Mark II-B. Rather, that's how we have the assault frigate Mark II in this game, because I guarantee you, if this game would have been created today, we would not see the Assault Frigate Mark II in there, at least not just yet. Not in the first wave. I think there was definitely the plans to kind of to kind of recreate a lot of the PC gaming experiences of the late '90s, early 2000s, and that kind of time frame. And I would love to see them kind of go back to that. There's a lot more ships like the DP-20 and a lot of that stuff and a lot of it is even technically canon now, while not necessarily being as recognizable to a lot of your common player base. But I think the time is right to kind of dig our toes a little bit more into canon, or past canon, into things that are more associated with Legends or the EU, and pull some of those ships into the game. I think it's well time that, and if we're going to have a new company take over and then they're hiring new developers and stuff, maybe there'll be a possible change of vision or focus for the way that they approach ships in the future. Now, a lot of that may have to do with licensing and licensor approval, and so there may be things, maybe they've wanted to do those things all along. We don't really know, but something that I think would be really cool. Next up, more campaign packs. I think this one's a given. I think this one's one a lot of people already expect. I think it's very reasonable to expect more campaigns. The campaigns that they have done have been huge successes. I mean, we're talking just cardboard expansions for Star Wars Armada. More cards, more upgrade cards, more objective cards, more squadron cards. And heck, and more ship titles. They could even put more ship cardboard in these particular packs if they wanted to do something like that as well. There's a lot they can do with a cardboard-only expansion. I mean, really, if they really want to stretch it, they could come out with some new shield dials that go up to 7. Like if they really want to be crazy and put that for a special ship or something like that. You never know. Who knows? Like I'm really thinking outside the box here, but I don't think they'll do that, because if this Super Star Destroyer didn't have it, then I don't think anything else is going to have it. But still, I mean, there's a lot of potential things that they could do with these expansions, and also for a campaign. They did talk about it. My interview with Michael Gurnis, we talked about these campaigns a little bit and how these were really built around the Rebels versus the Empire, and they're not necessarily kind of designed and or balanced for Clone Wars factions, and it'd be nice to see a campaign that can work for either, or maybe just a Clone Wars specific campaign, and then eventually moving on to one that's opened up for anyone, which it'd be really interesting to see a cross timeline, cross generational campaign. I think that could be a fun thing to do. Maybe it's even opens up to where you pick 2 factions each, and you do the first half during the Clone Wars, and then the second half during the Galactic Civil War. Maybe your fleets kind of upgrade, and maybe it even allows you to do some fun stuff where you carry like a ship or 2 over from one era to the other. So you might even be like rebels that are actually running a munificent or something like that managed to survive the Clone Wars. Wouldn't that be a cool idea for a campaign? I think that's a great idea to bring the Clone Wars into campaigns for Star Wars Armada, and I'd love to see that. Another thing I'd love to see is a fresh take on flotillas, and I'm using an older graphic here, but basically, I just thought this kind of summarized what I'm talking about. Flotillas right now are kind of seen as just super tiny ships on a small base, and you got 2 of them. Okay, got it. But nothing in the rules that say that they have to be on a small base. Nothing on the rules that says that they have to be the exact same ship on each miniature, right? So what if we came up with battle group flotillas, and it was, different ships that maybe were going to be on a medium base? I think if you had multiple small ships, you could fit that on a medium base. What if you were to do a large base flotilla, and that was like a Victory Star Destroyer and an Architans, or something like that? Like there's different types of battle groups I think that you could put together on a flotilla. And it would allow you to do some very different things. It would still technically be a flotilla and would therefore not really be able to ram other ships in the same way, and you'd still be restricted by the 2 flotilla maximum, so it would cause you to make some choices in list building, but it could also potentially offer some things that those ships don't offer on their own. and it could be very interesting. It might be a way for you to get more crew options on a single, ship activation. More officer slots that then would perhaps be available otherwise. There's all kinds of interesting directions that something like this could take, and I think it'd be a fun new take on flotillas. And it may even be an opportunity to re-examine some of those flotilla rules and either ease up on certain restrictions or offer new restrictions based on the way things are. There's a lot of ways that they could do it, and they could certainly restrict flotillas based on only 2 flotillas that happen to have scatter, because maybe larger flotillas might not have scatter. That might be a little bit overpowered if you had heavy firepower ships that also had scatter. So, maybe you take a larger flotilla and you just give them like a couple evades to help them make up for it. Maybe 2 evades, a redirect, and maybe they get 4 defense tokens for like a battle group flotilla, but none of them are a scatter. So it makes it a little bit more reasonable, right? Maybe there's a lot of different things they could do this way, but I think it'd be a fun, interesting new direction. And what I really love about doing something like this is because there's, due to points and point, caps for a particular battle. For a long time, I've always thought that even once they raised the point limit from 300 to 400, and that was a long time ago, you still never really got the feel that you were flying a full armada. Even when you do slightly larger battles, like 600 points, I've had 800-point battles that still didn't feel like an armada. And, in some cases, an 800-point battle where I was running the full Super Star Destroyer Executor, I had less ships than I've had in a 400-point battle. So, I would love to be able to do stuff like this in more multi-ship bases, because it gives you that a little bit more of that epic kind of feel. Like, I do have an armada. Maybe they're, I'm running like 2 or even 3 ships. Like maybe they amend flotillas to have them be more than 1 ship, maybe or more than 2 even, right? Maybe a flotilla of a certain size could have 3 ships on a base. And that'd be really cool, and it would look awesome. So I would love to see something like that happen. And I think that gives them a lot of new options for the future. Another thing I'd love to see, and this one some of you may disagree on, I think there's ways to do it, but I'm talking stolen ships. Stolen ships, look, there's a lot of individual cases in the story where we see ships get stolen. And I think stealing ships is a part of Star Wars. It's something that they haven't really done a whole lot, however, in Star Wars miniatures gaming. I remember bringing up this first when the Lambda shuttle was introduced in the Empire in X-Wing miniatures, and saying, well, how come we don't have the shuttle Tidarium? We have all these other titles for the shuttle, but we don't have the Tidarium, because that's the one the Rebels stole. And we were always wanting to get the shuttle Tidarium for the Rebels, but it wouldn't make sense to have a whole ship that there's only one, you can only run one possible thing, right? So what if we were to have stolen ships? And I bring up the the Phoenix Nest, the Quasar Fire Cruiser that was we really only see used by the Rebels. However, in this game, it's strictly an Imperial ship, right? And of course, in other formats, you will see it used by the Empire. If you play games like Star Wars Squadrons and things like that, you'll see this used by the Empire, because it is an Imperial ship. It's a great carrier, but there's of course there's balance issues, and a lot of people might say, well, you know what? If you give this to the Rebels, then they're going to have a really, really strong carrier, and it's the same thing that the Empire had, and I absolutely understand that. So, what I'd love to see, maybe in the form of a campaign pack. Or just a special cardboard only expansion called, Highway Robbery or something like that. And it's all about stolen ships. And it comes with a separate piece of cardboard and separate ship cards for every ship in the game that represent that ship being stolen or commandeered, or being an undercover ship stolen by another faction. And you won't even make them faction specific cards. Like if you're going to have a stolen Imperial Star Destroyer, for example, it would be available to any faction other than the Empire. And that would be the only thing, is you can't be of its parent faction. Now, how do you make this work and make it not completely overpowered? Well, you have to make it, if it's stolen, it's probably being crewed by a skeleton crew and not as effective as if it were in its parent faction. So one of the things that this means is you get no titles. you might get almost no upgrades. You might get maybe just an officer on each one, and you also get probably a lowered dice pool. You probably get 1 or 2 less dice in every single arc that's available, so it might not really be that beneficial for the rebels to steal a Star Destroyer. But at a certain point, if you nerf it too much, then you just make it dumb, and nobody'd ever want to do it. So I think there's maybe you make the cards double-sided. I think it would be a fun option to be able to do for those times when you want to play maybe a league game or a tournament level game, or even in a tournament, but you still want to go with a thematic build. So you want to run the Rebels with Phoenix Nest. Now, what I've said in the past is there's nothing stopping you from, as long as your opponent agrees, to run an Assault Frigate Mark II for the Rebels and just simply put a Quasar's miniature on that base. As long as your opponent is okay with it, then you have your thematic and you just pretend that is there. And that's a perfectly good perfectly good solution. But I think it'd be really cool if they actually allowed you a steal mechanic to kind of show up with a stolen ship. It might be worth more victory points, or maybe overcosted. It may not be tactically the best decision to go with, but I think having that option would be a pretty fun thing to do, as long as you kind of nerfed those ships. Because the problem with taking something out of faction and giving it to any other faction is certain factions are balanced, certain ships are designed and balanced around the strengths and weaknesses of their own faction. So you'd really have to, I think a lot of development, design, and playtesting time would go into something like this. I'm not sure how much of the community would really want something like this, and if it would really be worth it. Like, how many people would buy the stolen ship expansion, the cardboard expansion? It might be a $50 expansion. With how much cardboard would be in there, it'd be a decent amount. Because you're thinking, a new insert for every single ship in the game, and so that could be, that could end up being a little bit of a, slightly heavier expansion if you got a lot of cardboard in there. But at the same time, I think it'd be pretty fun. I would love to see it, but I don't know if everybody else would agree with me on that. Plus, there's plenty of homebrew ways to do something like that if you're just looking for, a narrative game. But I'd love to see, the potential of stolen ships showing up in the tournament scene, as long as they were balanced. It's something that's a lot easier said than done, however. I'll admit that. Moving on to some other more fun things. Space stations. Love to see space stations show up in the game. Look, space stations are kind of already in the game because we have the cardboard for space stations, right? But those kind of more represent generic stations. And I'd love to see some more specific big stations, especially with a purpose. Like, maybe there's a scenario and you get this awesome miniature that goes on its base, and like basically space stations that are designed kind of like ships are. And I think there's multiple ways that they could do something like this. It could be something that belongs to a faction. Maybe every faction gets a space station that they can deploy as if it were a ship, and maybe those space stations offer some type of benefit to the game outside of being able to move, because I don't think they ought to be able to move. But at the same time, I don't know if they need to be faction specific, or just maybe one general space station that offers a new gameplay variant, a scenario. Like, I did something like that on Crabbok.com. I have a Deep Space Nine expansion. If you wanted to use the WizKids Deep Space Nine, I have a whole a base for it. I've got rules for it and a scenario to go along with it, and it's fun. And so I think something like that could be a really fun way to go. And it just got me thinking more and more about space stations in the game. And it's considering that I play Legion as well, I do love the 3D terrain kind of element to the game. And that's one thing that Armada lacks, is that while it is in space and it is kind of like three-dimensional space, it's really just on a 2D plane, and you really don't usually have terrain on games that are strictly on a two-dimensional plane. And so it's harder to do obstacles and terrain and things like that in Armada, unless you're just going to have them be flat cardboard like they are. So I think space stations would be kind of a fun way to add a little more depth and beauty to the tabletop experience. I would love to see that. And lastly, more formats. I'd love to see more multiplayer formats. They did that Take the Station format, or that they announced a long time ago as like this kind of scenario that could play up to 4 players. But I would love to see a little bit more focus on that. Primarily something that could be like a 3 to 5 player variant. I worked on something like this a while back, but I eventually gave up on it because COVID is what I've been working on it, and it's really hard to get a bunch of people together and kind of test. It's hard to get 5 people together to all bring a fleet, show up, and test like a multiplayer variant. But basically, I was toying around with like kind of like a werewolf style mechanic to the game where everybody's dealt a card, and you're either on like the blue team or the red team, and there's a space station in the middle, and everybody, like the blue team wants to protect the station, but the red team wants to destroy the station, and I was trying to come up with clever ways to kind of cause everybody to need to get close to the station. Like the blue team would want to get close because they want to transfer shields over to the station, but the red team would get close like under the guise of transferring shields over to the station, but at the same time then if they got too close, then they could attack and kill it and claim victory. So but nobody knows who's who, and so you have like a lot of people like trading firepower with each other, and maybe if you hit somebody well enough, you could look at, like, if you got a critical hit on somebody, you could look at their card. Now I know I know you're good. Wait a second, but I don't know that you're good, and so like I was toying around with some stuff like that, but it was hard to really figure it out. I was going to release it as another free expansion, but never really finished it. So if like Atomic Mass Games wanted to come up with some kind of scenario like that, I think that would be really cool. Be a fun, different way to play Armada, and of course it would probably involve you having like only 1 or 2 ships each, thus to accommodate up to 5 players kind of standing around a table that's only so big. You can't really fit that many people around a 6x3 table without it getting kind of convoluted. So if everybody's got a full 400 point fleet, you're gonna have a problem. So I was thinking like maybe a 1 large, 1 medium, and 1 small ship, and then each of the 3 ships has a different role. Like only your large ship can interact with the station, but that's probably going to be your slowest ship, things like that. But something other than just a straight up death match, because otherwise 2 players duke it out, and then the third person kind of waits for them to finish and then swoops in and just finishes off everybody, and so that usually isn't as fun. So having different ways to kind of make everybody have need to engage or have a real desire to want to get close to engage. But if you add something else like secret roles to the game, or at least to a version of a multiplayer format, I think a hidden role kind of werewolf / mafia-esque game of multiplayer Armada could be really fun. And so I would love to see something like that actually show up that got kind of wide appeal. And I was trying to work on it myself, but I can't test it right now. I don't have the bubble big enough to really test something like that out, but I'd love to. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What are some of the things that you would love to see beyond just like, hey, I want them to do this ship or I want them to do that ship? Because I've done videos talking about that. I'm sure we're going to see some new ships from the Clone Wars. I'm sure we're going to see new squadron packs. Hopefully we'll still see more Empire and Rebellion, but I'd love to see new things that are kind of outside the box and maybe in slightly different directions as well. But let me know in the comments section. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys are awesome. Thank you for helping support the channel. And I couldn't do this without you. So thank you for your continued support. If you're interested in Patreon or any of the other links in the description below, like social media and other websites like Discord, be sure to check them out. Links are posted below. I want to thank you so much. And as always, have a great day.